Wednesday webinars. I will get used to that at some point. I'm so pleased to be here, and we're going to introduce our experts here in a minute. But to talk about this subject of social and emotional support, really for us, switching gears from all of the business continuity conversations we've been having in this crisis environment to this very important topic of how we take care of ourselves as adults and also as students. And I'm just so happy that we're able to share this time today. A couple of logistics: the presentation is posted in Q&A, and that's also where we'll be taking questions that Sarah will be moderating at the end of the session. I believe there's also a website link that's being posted in there for San Bernardino. They've built some resources available for all of you. We'll make sure that that's in there, and if not, in the presentation and recording to follow. So welcome on this beautiful Wednesday morning. I'm Tasha Davenport, CEO, and I'm really happy today to welcome back Sarah Bachez, our Chief Governmental Relations Officer here for CASBO, and our special guest, Colleen Williams, the Director of Student Wellness and Support Services with San Bernardino Unified School District. We may or may not be joined today by Sandra Rodriguez. They have a communications urgency that they want to pull her away for today, so we completely understand that. And our understanding is that Colleen is the expert. This is your wheelhouse, this is your work, so we're thrilled to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. So I think this is switching gears for your team, so it'll be interesting. One of the things that we have learned is that we all need a moment of social emotional support, right? This is where our connections matter. And so we're going to talk through what San Bernardino City Unified School District was able to do and is kind of still in process of doing. Definitely one of those conversations that Dr. Rodriguez got pulled away for. We had a board meeting last night with some big decisions about distance learning and returning to the physical setting. So we're going to give her that space and grace to know that sometimes there are decisions that trump our best plans. So I'm going to talk you through a few different details of our dynamic as a district. Really definitely looking at the social emotional wellness of our staff and hyper-focused there to be able to provide really great virtual settings for our students as well. And then what supports do we provide to students? And so we'll talk a little bit about, I was just sharing with the panel before we started that I inherited our health services department in June. And so I have the unique opportunity to work with our social emotional health and climate and culture folks, as well as our physical health. So it's a great marriage of working with and addressing the whole staff member and the whole child. So as we go, I'm just going to give you a snapshot of our district. If you don't know where San Bernardino is, it is sort of halfway between Los Angeles and Palm Springs, just to give you some very large markers. So we get a little of that desert heat. But we also have a lot of challenges. So we operate as an inner city area where most of our families are receiving free and reduced lunch. We have community violence that we address and have suffered some of those even on our own campuses. And so we very much have this highlight and understanding that social emotional learning actually is the foundation at which you operate, knowing yourself and knowing how to interact with others so that you can actually engage in the learning process. So those are just some of the highlights of our district, just to give you a chance to think through. It's a little bit old. So we're right around 50,000 students right now and have over 70 schools between early childhood all the way through adult school. So we very much have the idea of cradle to career as far as the supports that we provide. And then just to orient you on how we see the work is looking at the social emotional competencies If you look at that inner wheel, that's the work coming out of CASEL, which is the collaborative for the academic and SEL support, which is kind of our national guiding research base of all things SEL. And so it's divided into those 5 different categories of self-awareness and self-management, as well as social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And then we have adopted several different research-based and evidence-based initiatives. One of them being trauma-informed work from SAMHSA, where we really pull in this idea of creating safe, welcoming, and nurturing learning environments for even our most vulnerable population. We do have many of our students who may have suffered trauma, just community trauma and kind of chronic trauma over the course of their life. And so we want to make sure that we mitigate those as much as possible and create those safe environments where they do definitely feel like they have a voice and agency in that area as well. And then restorative practices and restorative justice, get that guiding work from the International Institute of Restorative Practices, IIRP, to really make sure that we're helping students identify how they feel, what are their emotions, what are they based on, and then how do I create relationships with my peers, with staff members at school, as well as how do we create this sense of community. And then the sometimes not so fun part of how do I then repair relationships that I may have harmed as well, which we all know as adults is a super important skill as we get older and learn to engage in different types of relationships, both professionally and personally as well. And then lastly, I have there for you in the learning aspect is the positive behavior interventions and supports, or PBIS. That work has been around for us the longest because its research is the most substantial and started first. And we really started with PBIS of setting high expectations, telling kids what we expected, giving them expectations by location and all of that work. And what we found was people who are really successful with that work actually did it through relationships. And so now that we have the restorative practices coming and supplementing, it really gives us, you know, a formal way of developing those relationships and repairing the harm. And then lastly on that look is also looking at the fact that we're supporting multiple people within this work. So our climate and culture definitely is around creating environments for students. But we also have to be aware that we need to create those environments for our staff as well. It needs to be safe, welcoming, and nurturing for them so that they feel like they can take risks, so they feel like they can do their very best work there and aren't nervous or scared of any repercussions. And then the supports that we provide to families, we'll get into some of those details as well. So we're using even survey data from each one of those elements to look at what are those pieces that each viewpoint needs from those climate and cultures. So if we look at social emotional learning is our ultimate goal. We ultimately want students to be able to leave our environment with the capacity to know themselves and know what they need to be successful, but they also need to be able to know how to navigate with other people in the world. Many of our jobs do not allow us any isolation, and we've discovered that even in stay-at-home orders and COVID that we have found ways to work together digitally and virtually to ensure that we are producing the best outcomes no matter what our role is. So if you transfer to the next slide for me, please, Sarah. Thank you. So we have some guiding work that we hinge all of our supports on is that, you know, a comprehensive approach to teaching SEL within a PBIS framework, so within that positive behavior intervention and supports, is making sure that we're actually implementing that social emotional behavioral support from a single team perspective. So at the district level, we have a team that pushes all of this work together. That happens to be my department, which is super exciting work for me, and I often geek out about, is that we work with counselors and we work with teachers and we work with our mental health therapists, et cetera. And so it's just such a think tank of how we can provide these supports in a tiered environment. And then at the school site, they have a single team called the Climate and Culture team that's constantly looking at their data points, constantly looking at that survey data, and determining what does that specific school site need, and then perhaps what do smaller groups of students or individual students need also to be successful in the learning environment as well as beyond the K-12 environment. So some of the other ways you teach SEL is actually to promote that adult wellness. There is a need for our adults to kind of have this journey of SEL as well. I don't know about you. I won't ask your age, but I know my own, and I think I've earned every gray hair on my head. But simply to say, nobody in my home environment talked about social emotional health. They talked about you following the rules and not embarrassing the family, but they didn't talk about identifying how you're feeling, why you're feeling that way. They didn't talk about setting goals and reaching them as far as your pieces of your self-management. Self-management was about your behavior only and whether or not it was positive for the family, right? And so allowing our adults to have this exposure and journey too, to realize sometimes students happen to trigger us in the learning environment, and why is that happening? And how can I actually make myself healthy enough so that I don't respond in a negative fashion when students tend to be a little challenging. And then expanding the data that teams use. So really looking at different data points to identify what types of SEL the families and students need in that environment, and then teaching those competencies. So we have a PBIS structure, we have behavior lesson schedules at all of our schools. And so actually really teaching students, what does it look like to interact with others? What does it look like to work in a group and be aware of cultural differences and address my cultural proficiency as well as part of my SEL journey too. So if we go to the next slide, that's kind of grounding the work, and then a little snapshot of the journey. So when our district went on stay-at-home orders, which was way back in March the 13th, which is probably familiar to most of you, but really the work that we were doing, we identified many people that were going to push into this work and start supporting what is the district's response going to be, and how are we proactively going to create environments that are safe for students, et cetera. And then part of that work, and I'm so proud of our district to say, was really thinking through mental health and wellness and social emotional health for our students and our staff. And then even supporting our families, because now they became, part-time teachers and part-time tutors as well. So all the work that we did as a research team was looking at kind of the guiding work from different countries of what was successful in places that had started addressing COVID before we did. And then we came out with a series of options. And so I just wanted to share with you, we had all of this work going on and people talking about how do we keep people physically distanced? How do we talk about the right PPE? How do we buy plexiglass and thermo scanners to take temperatures and all of that? And as all of those logistics are swirling around, we're hyper-focused and had a team that was able to hyper-focus on how do we keep everybody mentally healthy on top of all of that. And so some of the outcomes, if you go to the next slide, are in a tiered approach. So we really looked at what are we going to give all students, which is your tier one, and all staff as well. And then what are we going to provide for people who need a little more? And then what are we going to provide for individuals who are really suffering, need some individualized support, and that may be make or break for them in their environment. So just orienting you to this, that we were addressing all of these needs kind of at the same time. So after that work of our team in the spring, I basically came back to my department and said, so here's what we're going to build. And they have been so excited to be on this journey. and have done a phenomenal job. I can't thank my team enough for everything that's being created and all of the supports that we have. So if you look there on the staff side and making sure we are supporting staff, if you start from the bottom up, we talked about, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail, but what supports do we provide for administrators to support their staff? So most of my staff doesn't interact with staff all the time or students all the time. We are supports at balcony above. And so making sure we provide ease of use to our administrators, whether those are department administrators or site administrators, with all of those skills that staff need as they transitioned from the physical setting of teaching and learning how to do Google Meets and creating a Google Classroom and all of those crazy components that they found themselves in. And then providing counseling services and supports if necessary, and then even some direct supports to staff members in need as well. And we'll dig into all of that here. This is just to ground you a little bit on where we're going for the rest of this hour. And then on the student side, if you start at the bottom, definitely looking at providing those virtual classroom supports. What do we do to help support students navigate who may not have family members at home that are technologically savvy enough to help them get on their Google Classroom and submit activities online and homework assignments, et cetera. And so I'm really helping support our staff to do their very best work in supporting our students as well. We definitely identified what's the counselor's role in stay-at-home orders. And because counselors get their professional development from our department as well, it gave us an opportunity to recapture their role as mental health professionals and supporting that work, as well as supporting our students with their A to G success and their college and career aspirations as well. And then we have a multitude, you can see how big that tier 3 box is, and we'll dig into some of that, but we have a multitude of supports that have transitioned into the virtual world, as far as continuing supports that we have for students for their mental health concerns and resources for students who are even identified with mental health concerns during this COVID environment as well. So if we dig in a little bit with our staff supports on the next slide, when we came out of that work in the spring, we really were going with those guiding research quotes there, is that we really actually have to allow adults the opportunity to connect and to heal and to cultivate their own competencies and capacity. And then if we don't address those, we're going to have actually more responsive services that are going to be necessary, because people may not be managing well if we don't help support them, right? And so the takeaway of the supports that we built for staff was we provide administrative trainings and employee support services, and then staff SEL support. So that's kind of the complete package look at the services that we provide to staff. We create, and I'll dig into those in detail. So if we skip to the next slide, we created a website that kind of houses all of this physically distanced schooling. We call it PDS. All the supports coming out of our department around the mental health and supports for staff and students. So you will have this link to this website in the Q&A, I think, right? And so you can access our website. It's a Google site, so that you can see kind of the journey that our team has been on to provide supports. And it's a website in action. It's a living website because we keep improving and building upon it as we go. But really, this should be the one-stop shop for staff to be able to find anything that they need regarding social emotional health for themselves and their students. So some of those supports, those proactive strategies that we created for administrators, definitely the grab and go activities, if we can go to the next slide, and making sure that we had different types of activities. So our Administrators continue with professional development time every Monday. It's on the schedule for our district. And so we have recommended strongly to our site administrators that they spend the time to address the social emotional needs of their staff and be supportive and aware that they're going through a huge transition as they learned all those things I mentioned before, like Google Classroom and Google Meets, and how to get kids engaged online and how do you support them when you're not standing right next to them. And so we wanted to create different learning activities where our administrators literally could go, I've got 10 minutes at the beginning of my staff meeting. What could I just grab and put in place? So that's definitely how these were designed as full pocket activities, with some with voiceover or some with kind of lesson plan structures to them to explain to the administrator how they could put this in place. So we had a collection of these inclusive activities, welcoming inclusive activities, things like community building circles for staff, share outs. My team that built this on our own staff meeting last week had a categories game for us of, different content and starting with this letter and really having a fun time with it. There's something about being able to giggle with other people, even if it's online, that decompresses a bit as well. And then engaging strategies. How do we get folks thinking about what their current state is? Because some of our folks who are not as aware of their own SEL or their own self-awareness don't actually realize how stressed they are. And they're just kind of going through the motions and amped up. And so how do we give them mindfulness strategies, breathing techniques, some things to do on their own, or even thinking about how do you actually ensure that you provide yourself some dedicated time to de-stress, and whatever de-stress looks like for you, right? Whether it's exercise or walking or reading a book or doing some things for yourself when there's not exactly a transition from where I'm sitting right now. There's not exactly a transition between here and my kitchen to provide food for my family or the different kind of overwhelming tasks that we're pulled into even in our households, right? So making sure we're aware and supporting that. Many of our staff members are also parents, and so they're doing online learning with their kids and also trying to be the teacher, and so kind of those worlds are colliding for them. And then looking at different ways to reflect and the optimistic closure, definitely looking at how do we wrap up a meeting and leave people feeling like they are motivated to do well and feel a sense of balance and support from their team members as well. So those are all grab and go activities for our administrators, literally to just download and take, and they can personalize them if they want to, but you would have access to those on that website as well. And we welcome you to dig in and find something that works for you and your team as well. One of the other supports that we provided in a responsive way is looking at adult mental health first aid. So we are part of a grant with Dignity Health, and this was pre-COVID, of the different supports that we have. That grant is actually for youth mental health first aid, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But our research team in the spring came back with, we actually have to have our administrators equipped to look for warning signs and risk factors of mental health concerns in their staff. And so that's what this training seeks to do, adult mental health first aid. And it's from Mental Health America. Actually, there was some work from the state of California that just came out to recommend youth mental health first aid. And so we wanted our administrators to participate in this training. And actually, this is a really great spot for our partnership with our county, because we do not have in-district trained trainers at this moment. So we're actually using some staff from our county to help support trainings for our administrators so that they are more aware of what to look for when their staff members may be having mental health concerns. And then how do I actually get you the support that you need? So I don't have to be a therapist to be able to attend this training. I don't have to be anyone with any mental health training or background. It's really for the layperson to be able to say, oh, there's a concern right here. And just like it says, is how do I help support, put the Band-Aid on the wound, and then get them the support that they need if they need to get some counseling services or mental health needs. And then here's our first opportunity. So I want to hear from you in the Q&A, is being able to share with us what are some of the pieces, and you may or may not know, that your districts are doing, because of course, if I'm sharing with you, I want to steal from all of you as well. So what are some of those mental health supports that your district has put in place for adults? And then we're going to transition and talk about the work of kids here in a second. So I give you a second to put those in the Q&A, but would love to hear your feedback and see what you come up with as far as, what are you doing to support staff? Could be something silly, right? Could be, we had a Rochambeau activity with health services where if you won Rochambeau, you got to pick the little exercise warm-up that we were going to do together. And so you just see everybody doing washing machines together on their classroom, on their little cameras, which is hysterical. So it doesn't always have to be something complex. All right, so as you're thinking about those, we'll transition over to the supports for students. And I'm going to go forward, thank you. And looking at coming out of that research in our spring is really that work of, it's more and more the responsibility, even pre-COVID, more and more the responsibility of the school system to help create environments that promote positive social emotional competencies and positive mental health. Oftentimes mental health is kind of seen as a negative, and we'd like to recapture it and say mental health is the actual ability to navigate all of those pressures and situations and still come out feeling like you're equipped and feeling like you can move on rather than something just crushes you. That doesn't mean that you're always happy, doesn't mean that you always have a smile on your face, but that you can go through that wave of emotions, go through that frustration or disappointment, and come out the other side feeling like you learned something still from a situation that may have not been positive for you. And you have some takeaways to learn and grow from, right? So definitely the responsibility of our system to help support and promote mental health. The more that we build in SEL supports, the happier, healthier, and well-balanced our students will be. We like to imagine that the opportunity that we have to have our students 13 plus years could really change the dynamic of an entire community if you get SEL well implemented and in place in every single school environment, that your community members would become much more SEL capable in the world. So we're playing with that experiment as we go as well. So definitely Castle's work is saying that this new type of learning is stressful for our students. We know it's stressful for our staff. We hear in our town hall meetings, it's stressful for parents as well. Many of our families are just doing the best that they can and are having some concerns with even basic needs of food and housing. And so really want to help support with those. And we'll talk through those in a second. But coming out of that research was really these four kind of guiding elements that we'll dig into a little bit, is providing staff training for the youth mental health first aid, looking for warning signs and risk factors of mental health concerns in our students. And so we have recommended that all of our certificated and classified staff that have touch points with students attend that training. And we have an in-district team that is providing those trainings and have started in September and go all the way through December and probably on into the spring until we can capture everybody and get a schedule that works for everyone. And then provide social emotional learning, direct instruction, really teaching kids what it is, how do I navigate? What are all these pieces? And kind of what I alluded to earlier was all those things that even in my household or in my schools, we didn't actually talk about or teach beyond just manage yourself in public, right? So really doing those pieces as well. And then SEL embedded into academics is the opportunity to take SEL and work it through all of your curricular pieces. When I'm talking about really looking at the type of activities that I'm designing for students and looking at their SEL capacity and seeing, am I giving them an instructional practice that they can actually do at their developmental level, or at the level that I find all of my students on, right? Like if I do a mini assessment of how they interact with each other, I may actually have to put some pieces in place and do some teaching, some direct instruction teaching around how do you actually disagree appropriately? How do you talk through when you're working with a group or a partner and you don't agree? And really declaring those things as we look at what are the SEL prerequisite skills for instructional best practices. So this is the marriage between all things, climate and culture and social emotional health, as well as the academic side of the fence. And then really looking at wellness as a piece of climate and culture. So that's kind of the newest work out of the student wellness department. I know that's funny since we're called student wellness, but really looking at how do we consider the whole child, their physical health, their mental health, all of those pieces as indicators of the type of climate and culture that our students need. So if we dig into that a little bit with a few highlights for you, is on the next slide, we talk through student SEL supports. So we have adopted curriculum for SEL. We have Frog Street for our early childhood and preschool, which I just love that name. It makes me smile to say Frog Street. They have their own SEL work. And then we as a district have adopted Second Step for K-8 for our kinder through 8th grade students, and then School Connect for our high school students. And so our team, we have a series of SEL standards and benchmarks, grade span benchmarks. So we have standards for self-awareness. We have standards for relationship skills. So these are the abilities that we want to get students to by the end of their time with us in San Bernardino City. And grade span benchmarks. So K2, 3, 6, 6, 8, and 9, 12. What are the earmarks of what students would be able to do? So teachers have an ability to look at their students and see if they're able to do the benchmark at that grade span, or do I have to go back and scaffold some supports for them to get to that place in whichever competency, right? Some of us are better in some competencies than others. And so here's just a snapshot of what that looked like. So on that website, they have mapped out the connection between our SEL standards and benchmarks and the Second Step curriculum. So it is completely done for elementary. Second Step released new curriculum for middle school. So for us, 6th through 8th grade in September. And so they're currently mapping that work, and then they'll get to the high school work as well. But you can look at, we have here a SEL self-management standard, which is the individual demonstrates the skills to manage and express one's emotions, thoughts, impulses, and stress in a constructive way. So that's our district standard, 2.1. We made up our own numbering there. And then the benchmarks that go with that is that they're able to self-monitor, self-talk, and regulate my emotions. I don't know if all of you have had that in the virtual setting, but there have been moments where I've had to talk myself out of something or into something as you engage in this virtual environment and meeting hop or webinar hop from place to place. And then demonstrate the skills for handling pressure situations. What do you do when you're in that situation? How do you manage that? Do you walk away? Do you seek help? Do you confront a person? Some people would say confront, but does that lead you down the best path, right? So getting that information established and knowing how you would make those decisions. And then describe and demonstrate ways to express my emotions in socially acceptable ways. So I can tell you how I feel, but I could tell you how I feel in a lot of different ways, right? Sometimes people tell you how they feel just by saying good morning to you. And you know right there, right then, how they're feeling. And so you can look at how we've mapped this. These are all the different lessons that address this standard within the second step curriculum. So it digs in quite deeply and helps support our staff know, I've got this curriculum, I want to work on self-management, now what do I do? And so we've mapped those pieces together so that our staff won't have to do that on their own. And then the next slide is really talking about the embedding of SEL into the academics. So you can see there, our icon from the website is that there are 3 ways to do that, right? We foster those academic mindsets, really helpful to be self-aware of when I need to actually ask people for help because I don't understand a concept, or I need to set minor goals. Time management is something in the virtual world that our students are having to come up with perhaps on their own because they have synchronous work and they have asynchronous work. And how do I get my assignments done for our older kids for each one of my classes, right? How do I align SEL and academic content? And then using that interactive pedagogy, right? So how do I look at even the 4 C's of communication and critical thinking, and how do I actually bring my SEL competencies to that work as well? So really looking at those differences. And then on the next slide, we kind of dig into the mental health first aid work. So in this training aspect, it's youth mental health first aid. And this is for our certificated staff. So all of our teachers and counselors and psychologists, et cetera. And also our classified staff, so our instructional assistants, our health aides, our recreational aides, our office staff, really looking for these mental health concerns and how to get them the support that they need. And then this is just a quick reference of how that connects to social emotional learning, right? So as a participant of that training, I actually need to be aware of thoughts and body responses when students are in need. How do I completely freak out because a student needs support, or am I able to stay calm and being a calming presence and kind of co-regulate that student and provide them the support even if we're in a virtual setting? And then how do I actually balance my own self-care to stay calm in that situation? And let's see, in responsible decision making, utilizing a plan to support that student. How do we get them the type of support that they need? How do I reach out to my counselor if I'm a teacher, or reach out to even our district police department has been involved with supporting our students with potential self-harm or potential suicide cases. And so they have been a great partnership in making sure that they're providing welfare checks for our students if we have an extreme situation and need for that student. So looking at interacting, and I'm not able to see the Q&A responses, so I hope to see those soon. But we wanted to ask you an opportunity to say, what SEL supports have you provided to students in your district? As we have gone to stay-at-home orders, what has that looked like for you in the virtual setting? And then we'll talk about a few more details about some supports with even physical health as well, and mental health extremes and physical health. So I'll give you a couple of minutes for Q&A there. And you can go ahead and advance, I think, 2 slides, Sarah.
Will do.
Thank you so much.
I think we have a few shy people, but we're more than happy to see the Q&A if someone would begin that. And that requires us to, we have to wait for a participant to write so we could submit to you our slides and the links.
Gotcha.
So I just
It's
wanted
our
to chime
hook for
in.
making sure we have good questions. We're like, we'll give you the slides when you ask a question. No, it's a technical event where we have to have a question there to provide the slides. And just while we have a moment, while we're waiting for that, I want to also welcome Sandra Rodriguez. Thank you for being here today. I know we're taking a step back there, but we really appreciate your commitment to being a part of this conversation today. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank Colleen for her leadership through all of this. She has been juggling so many plates with her regular job and then assisting with the actual coordination of our COVID response. Her commitment to the district, her commitment to students is second to none. This lady works like 18, 20 hours a day sometimes. I don't know when she sleeps. Just really because she's so committed to this work. The work of her department transcends just the learning, right? We have to make conditions conducive for learning. So making sure that kids' health and safety is observed and is paramount, and coordinating efforts to make sure that, you know, kids have the immunizations that they need. And then also just those things that we can't see. And coordinating the efforts around how do we respond to students when they are just not feeling up to learning. And then most recently, our board just made a decision yesterday to hold off opening. So we're gonna remain in distance learning, and so we're having to deal with the aftermath of that. So as soon as Colleen gets off this call, we will be working on some talking points for our counselors so that they can help students through the grief process, knowing that they're probably not going to be returning back to school this school year. So lots of work to make sure that our kids are getting all the supports they need so that they're mentally healthy, physically healthy, and overall able to engage in their education. So that's off to Colleen.
Yeah, and that passion really comes through. For those in our audience, Sandra Rodriguez is the assistant superintendent for student services, also in San Bernardino, USD. So you got some great resources here available. And I think we have our first question, Sarah.
So it looks like it's a way of supporting, right? Chris Tickell, we know you, Chris Tickell. I'm glad you're here. So definitely teaming with Feeding America to send boxes of food to the families. That's fantastic. Definitely with food scarcity or employment scarcity for our families, they need all the supports they can get. And so that's wonderful to see the supports there, especially with counselors reaching out. That we like to say that the counselors are the heart of the district, right? They have that passion of helping and supporting, but so many of our staff members have that as well. So thank you, Chris. Glad to see you here. All right. So as those ideas roll in, thanks, Chris, for being the first. And Dr. Rodriguez, thank you for those kind words. We have been lucky enough to have a relationship for over probably longer than either one of us want to admit, probably 15 plus years in different roads across the district. And so it's been a fun transition as she has come in as our assistant superintendent as well. So I wanted to move on to just a few more services. And I know we're a few minutes before, open Q&A. So I just want to be mindful of that time. I did want to share with you that over the summer, definitely in the spring and over the summer and kind of ongoing, is we provided some services and supports to make it easy for our staff to get families what they needed. And so this is a very detailed spreadsheet, but really the takeaway is whoever's interacting with the family, if the family needed something, both of physical health or of mental health, that we would have a one place to come. And so we had a referral process. I said had, but we have a referral process developed by our team where our school counselors or our nurses could refer students that needed some support beyond what the assigned nurse or the assigned counselor could do, because we did not want to usurp the responsibilities of those folks or their ability to connect with the families that are assigned to their schools. So we have a wellness team a team of literally 3 people who multitask and spin plates as well as I do, thank goodness. But they were available every single day through the entire summer months, et cetera. So always one of them was on deck to make sure that they were answering these referrals. And so there was a referral Google form process that we set up, identifying the family, seeing what they needed. And then between our in-district supports and our community-based partnerships, we were able to offer them multiple things. So health services has a lot of supports just built in because that's where our 22 nurses reside and our 4 LVNs. And then we have a teledoc program. And last year it was at 12 of our schools. We paid for it to be at 12 of our schools. And really it is a program where our students can come to the health aide office and access a primary care physician or a nurse practitioner right there digitally with the help of the health aide and get on and see what is needed. And then there is over-the-counter medication that can be given, obviously with parent permission, or prescriptions can be called into the local pharmacy after the physician is able to make contact with the family. So then the family doesn't have to come pick up the student, take them to the doctor, and lose, time and perhaps money from employment, et cetera. So Hazel Health was able to graciously allow us to do a Hazel Health at Home program. So our families have access to that from the convenience of their own home. So all of those Chromebooks and iPads that our students have that are district issued, or their own cell phones and technology, other technology pieces that they have, that those families can access Hazel Health from those services. And they actually allowed us to take it district wide. So we provide that service for all of our students 4 years old and up. So they have that access. And then we have our Inland Empire Health Plan, which is it's the biggest Medi-Cal health plan that we have in the IE, which is Inland Empire of San Bernardino, kind of Riverside area. And they have a program called Navigators where we can refer a family, and that navigator can come out and basically provide the family with wraparound supports, right? So does the family need support with rent? Do they need clothing? Do they need food? Do they need medical support? And so those navigators also were at 12 schools and were able to go district wide with to provide that support during COVID, which has been just a spectacular partnership of services and supports for our families, and making sure that they get the medical care and other basic needs met. And then we have a few other partnerships. If you go kind of down that strain, we have Uplift Family Services that does family support. So it may be counseling for the entire family, or services such as counseling or hyper-focused on students specifically. And then our partnership with our county office Department of Behavioral Health actually has given our district contract to Victor Community Support Services for intense like therapy and supports. And then we also have what we call the HEART team, which is an in-district mental health therapy team. So I have 3 staff members that 2 of which are licensed MFTs. And so they support students with individualized mental health supports. And then they also have associates or interns that are master's degree level folks getting their hours that also service our students. And then my staff members supervise them. So it's a way to actually multiply my staff members to provide more supports for students. So those were all of the services that we didn't have to build. They were services that just transitioned into the virtual world. And then if we move to the next slide, Sarah, really talking about just other pieces that we've transitioned to the virtual world. So we talked about the counselor role already, but if you look at that kind of aqua or teal box, so the counselor role and responsibilities, what they were responsible for in stay-at-home orders. So our counselors have their own Google Classroom. The students are aware of how to access them. They can continue to support students in small groups and individuals. and ensuring and pushing into the classroom. They do some of the tier 1 classroom instruction for SEL, and helping support the teacher in that way as well, especially in our elementary and middle schools. And then mental health therapy services, that HEART team, we've transitioned them completely into the virtual setting. So students that were receiving services before March 13th, I think we took a week off to build it in the virtual setting, but they continued with services throughout the remainder of last school year, the 1920 school year, and then into this year as well. And then we have transitioned our self-harm or suicide risk assessment process into the virtual setting. So if students are in need and at risk of harming themselves, we have a process for all of our health professionals to complete. And for us, health professionals would be counselors, nurses, and psychologists are all trained to do the risk assessment for suicide or self-harm. Not listed here is we also have a partnership with Gaggle, and Gaggle helps us monitor our students' Google Drives and Gmail for anything of concern, whether it's photographs or information. And so part of that work and part of their notifications are around self-harm. And so those notifications happen. Gaggle has actual humans that are monitoring this. It's not an AI program. And so they provide us that information, and how they even tell us kind of what level of concern it is based on the information. And so we actually have a great partnership with our district police department. So they get those notifications 24/7 like I do individually, and help us make sure that we're getting welfare checks on our students, because oftentimes our families don't know what their students are going through. So we want to make sure that we support them even in their most needy time, and making sure they get the immediate support that they need before something kind of catastrophic happens. And then we have a district crisis intervention team. That is a team that supports staff and students when there is a death or a passing of a staff member or a student, or there's like a catastrophic event. Years back, we had a small airplane land in a field next to one of our schools, and made the students very nervous. And so the crisis team went out for that to help support them, right? So it doesn't just have to be death. They're not the death patrol, but they definitely help people through kind of that immediate crisis response. And that's not a team that's their full-time job. That team is made up of our counselors, program specialists that work for me, school psychologists, some nurses. So it's a team that's kind of on the fly and on deck whenever there's a need. And then we pull whatever size team we need for that service. And so we've transitioned that into the virtual world. And unfortunately, we've had need to be able to deploy that team several times already this year in a virtual setting, and providing support for staff, and sometimes providing support for students in the virtual setting as well. And then the nurse role and responsibilities, as you can imagine, they can't do, dental, hearing, vision screenings right now in COVID. And so what is their role and responsibility to ensure that we're helping support our students? And I know Dr. Rodriguez mentioned that immunizations was a huge push for us. So we have partnerships with our county and some nonprofit partnerships with Loma Linda University and their medical supports, as well as Borrego Health and some others that are actually helping us provide flu clinics, COVID testing, and immunization. So we're right now actively planning a one-stop medical shop for families at our local baseball team stadium, with the support of some of those partners, so that we can do dental screenings, immunizations, flu shots, vaccines. We'll have the IEHP staff there so that people can sign up for the Medi-Cal insurance billing, et cetera. And then Hazel Health at Home is also, I spoke about that earlier, just transition to the home environment rather than just a school support. So without further ado,
let me add a couple of things to that, Colleen.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure too that, we're not losing, when we're talking about response, the majority of our response to our families and students has been in the virtual world, using Google or Zoom. But we've also have another layer to making sure that our students are staying connected. And so through our partners and through some of our vendors that are working with our district, we've been able to do hundreds of home visits to our families to ensure that they still remain connected with the schools. Our teachers have gone out and have done parades to open the school in their cars to make sure that they're socially distanced. And so it's really an effort to really connect with families, because they feel that they're very isolated right now. And so we've started virtual recess. Colleen was on the cutting edge of that, where we're creating opportunities for students to socialize with their peers, and really try to simulate that experience for them. We're running our after school programs as well in a virtual environment to really kind of help to take the stresses off of, you know, what they're experiencing in school, being very strong in academics because of the limited time that we have with students. And so really this balanced effort of having the virtual response, but also that human connection with our home visits. And, you know, one of our great partners that we've had over the last few years has been Loma Linda University. And so we've been able to contract with them. And I think Colleen alluded to that. They have community health education workers, and they provide a wraparound service for families. And so what we've done is we've looked at students who are chronically absent. We've looked at communities where absenteeism is high, and really worked to pinpoint that service to them, to really get to the root of why students are not coming to school. And what we found in that experience of these home visits is that there's lots of deep-rooted issues around childcare, generational poverty, all these things that we already know. But through our partner, who then has more services and resources, they're able to help parents with giving them some job skills. Helping them to recognize that when the family is strong, the students are going to do better. And so this concerted effort around looking at the total whole child and looking at different facets of how we can support them, supporting them in academics, supporting them in their mental health, supporting their family and the family unit, getting them the resources that they need as far as food, shelter, some of those basic needs. We've really worked to complement this work that Colleen is doing with some of the other sister departments within student services. And so I'm very proud of the work that Colleen has really spearheaded, as well as the work of our departments in family engagement, and the work that they're doing in trying to engage families and helping them to understand the value of education and the importance for them to be online and completing assignments. In addition, our Atlas program, which is that serves our homeless and foster youth who are meeting families in parks to make sure that they have the things that they need, providing them with resources like solar chargers so that they can stay connected, and really just focusing on, you know, right now they don't have the school, they don't have shelter, they don't have restrooms. And so, you know, we're really looking to see how do we help them and lessen the impact. And so just this collaborative, interactive, and very connected effort around how do we support students so that they will excel has really been a concerted effort on everyone's part. And I think that's the beauty of this work around SEL. When we truly understand that students need to be in a place where they feel safe in body, safe in mind, safe in environment, then kids will thrive. And then when we give them the resources on how to cope with challenges, and that we're also supporting the family to help their child also be successful, we're really looking at how to change a generation of families, and really how do we help them to be more engaged, because it's not just about going to school every day or passing your classes, or even graduating from high school. It's how are we preparing students to be career and college ready, and also a whole person, and understanding their strengths and weaknesses and having the confidence and the resilience to be able to conquer whatever obstacle that they faced in a healthy way. And I think that's really what the work that Colleen's team really does, is how do we help kids and support them so that they can respond to challenges in a healthy way. And so I applaud her work, and really the district's work in really having this perspective around it's whatever it takes. And our board has been tremendous in this work and supporting these efforts, and really looking at digging deep and not accepting the surface answer of they can't achieve, because we all know as educators, we believe it's possible, it's possible. We have to help kids see, their presence and their light and what the gifts that they have, and help to mold that into something that, they will be proud of and be productive to society as they continue to move on in their education and in their life. So just a little 2 cents there.
Absolutely. So we definitely don't do this work on our own, and definitely supporting the school sites, and in conjunction with our family engagement office and many other services and supports. So go ahead and hop to the questions slide. I think we can skip the last one and just open for questions. I know where we are in time, so.
And if there's any questions from our members, I know it's a smaller cohort this time around, and we understand people's schedules. I think this has been such helpful information. So we'll give people a second to see if there's any questions.
While they're doing that, I just want to compliment the leadership at your district to invest the mind span, the energy, put this as a priority. So I really want to compliment all of you at the district. And then I want to thank you for such comprehensive resources. These are provide a structure and provide a method and an approach to doing some extremely meaningful but very holistic work around the student and the adults. And your willingness to share it, to just be so open with sharing that with our environment. Thank you for that. I have a great appreciation of the partnerships that you talked about. I think it's amazing how you've connected with the community to leverage the work that you're doing. And I also learned, I was sitting there, Colleen, thinking we might be from the same family, because all of the focus on us as kids were like to have the right manners and to behave the right way. And I learned a lot. So thank you. I know that our members are pretty much in the same conversations as the next meeting that you guys are going into. But I do expect to see a lot of downloads and shares of this information. It's just so valuable and much appreciated. We don't have any other questions, so we will just wrap with knowing that your information is available to our audience. We'll be sharing this presentation along with additional resources that Sarah continues to build this knowledge base. But our greatest gratitude and appreciation for you being here today. Thank you.
Wonderful.
We want to thank you too for providing this venue, as well as all great professional development that you provide to school leaders. I've been a member of CASBO only for a short amount of time, but I have found the resources and the trainings to be so useful and applicable, things that you can implement like the same day or the next day. So thank you so much for what you do for us as school leaders.
You're welcome.